Imagine this. You wake up in a life you don't recognize, but not because the walls are unfamiliar or the people have changed. You wake up in your own bed, in your own body, with the same morning coffee ritual, the same notifications blinking on your phone, and yet something is terrifyingly off. You look in the mirror and your face stares back blankly, not out of amnesia, but something more chilling. The realization that you've been playing a role for so long. You no longer know who's underneath the mask. You have the job, the degree, the relationship, maybe even the kids, the friends, the hobbies. But in the quiet spaces, in elevators, in traffic, in the dark at 3:17 a.m., you feel it, that nauseating dissonance. A pulse beneath the surface whispering, "This isn't really you. This has never been you." And here's the paradox that rips through your chest like a blade wrapped in velvet. You've done everything right. You obeyed the map society gave you. You colored inside the lines. You followed the path. So why do you feel like an actor reading a script you never wrote? What if the person you've become is the very thing keeping you from who you truly are? What if your routines are a well-designed trap and your personality is just a fortress built to survive the world, not a reflection of your soul? It's a haunting contradiction. You've constructed an identity brick by brick, education, opinions, preferences, social roles, yet somehow you remain a stranger to yourself. A carefully curated ghost, not fully alive, not fully dead, suspended in the unbearable gray between performance and purpose. And so the question sears through your mind like wildfire. Who are you when no one's watching? Not the curated version, not the resume, not the filtered smile. Strip away the job title, the social identity, the politics, the trauma response. What's left? The truth is, most people will live their entire lives without ever answering that question. Not because they can't, but because the question itself is dangerous. To ask it sincerely is to threaten everything you've built, your relationships, your beliefs, even your sanity. But here's the deeper horror. What if your life hasn't even started yet? What if, as Carl Jung suggested, life doesn't begin at birth, or at graduation, or marriage, or retirement, but at the moment you find yourself, truly, authentically, brutally, without excuse or costume? And what if that moment never comes? You see, there's an existential trick being played on you. From the moment you could walk and speak, you were being sculpted. Parents shaped you. Teachers graded you. Society programmed you. Even your rebellion was absorbed, commodified into fashion trends and Spotify playlists. You were taught what to want, who to be, and what not to question. So when you feel lost, it's not a personal failure. It's an ancient sickness, a spiritual amnesia passed down through centuries, a life lived asleep. But then, if most people never wake up, what does it actually mean to find yourself? Is it discovering some hidden blueprint of who you were meant to be? Or is it something far more radical, something terrifying in its implications? Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But privilege comes with a price. And that price is everything false within you. Every borrowed belief, every inherited fear, every mask you didn't even realize you were wearing. So here you are, standing on the threshold of that great question, feeling the ground crumble beneath the version of you you've always defended. And still you hesitate, because the truth doesn't come gently. It shatters, it burns, it rewires your nervous system, it demolishes the architecture of your ego. But in that destruction, Something ancient and luminous stirs, something that has waited in the shadows for decades, watching, aching, biding its time. Could it be that you were never supposed to build yourself, but uncover yourself, not through achievement, but through stripping away? Not by chasing more, but by surrendering what was never yours. Now feel this, that ache in your chest isn't emptiness. It's a calling. It's the signal flare of a soul refusing to be buried in automation. You are not your resume. You are not your trauma. You are not even your thoughts. You are the awareness beneath all of it, the watcher behind the mask, waiting to be reclaimed. And so the great question remains, burning quietly behind every mirror, under every breath, inside every sleepless night. Have you ever actually met yourself? Or have you only ever met the version the world rewarded? Now, let's go deeper. Let's trace this silence back to its origin. Let's expose the hidden machinery, the psychological and philosophical roots of why you feel like a ghost in your own life. Because only by understanding what buried you can you begin to rise. You didn't choose the mask you wear. It began long before you had language to describe it, before you could even form memories. You were born into a world already vibrating with expectations. Parents projecting their unlived dreams onto your small shoulders. A culture ready to classify you by gender, race, potential, status, before you even spoke your name. By the time you were 5, you had already learned the reward system. Approval equals survival. And so began the great betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. Carl Jung called this betrayal the process of individuation denied. The soul's growth is arrested the moment we choose persona over authenticity, the moment we silence the parts of ourselves that don't fit the mold. We didn't destroy these parts, we buried them. And like all buried things, they began to rot and scream from below. This is the hidden problem. You were shaped to adapt, not to awaken. Every society creates a mold and tells you it's a mirror. You conform to survive, and the more you fit in, the more invisible your true self becomes. This is not a modern dilemma, it's a fundamental structure of civilization, what Nietzsche called herd morality. The morality of fitting in, of playing the role, of not asking why, only how. And slowly, you forget. You forget what your own voice sounds like. You forget the wildness in your chest, the freedom in your limbs, the clarity in your eyes. You learn to distrust your instincts. You become fluent in self-doubt. What's left is a fragmented identity. Jung warned us that the self split in this way creates what he called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, deny, or hide because they threaten the image we've been taught to project. And yet, paradoxically, these very parts are the key to becoming whole. But here's the deeper twist. Society needs you to be divided. A divided self is manageable, predictable, marketable. A divided self consumes more, conforms easier, and questions less. If you don't know who you are, there will always be a product, a trend, a dogma waiting to fill that void. Entire industries thrive on your disconnection from your body, your spirit, your intuition. Arthur Schopenhauer, that dark titan of pessimism, saw it clearly. Most people suffer not from the cruelty of life, but from the emptiness of it. The internal void created when we mistake stimulation for meaning, comfort for truth, distraction for purpose. And what fills that void is often noise, news feeds, marketing, ideologies, not understanding. So you perform, you adapt, you survive. But deep in your subconscious, another battle is being waged. Your true self, the part of you untouched by conditioning, is not dead. It is exiled, and exile breeds hunger. It gnaws at your dreams, disturbs your peace, sabotages your relationships, whispers into your addictions. You wonder why you're always anxious, why you chase goals only to feel hollow once they're achieved, why your successes feel like costumes, not triumphs. This is not because you're broken, it's because you're split. Jean-Paul Sartre described it as bad faith. When we live inauthentically, when we lie to ourselves about who we are, when we become characters in a play we didn't write, we do it to avoid responsibility. But the cost is staggering, the forfeiture of freedom, and yet the system rewards you for this bad faith. If you silence your truth, they call you professional. If you betray your passion, they call you pragmatic. If you abandon your inner voice, they call you successful. They give you titles, trophies, tax breaks, but never peace. Aldous Huxley once warned that the greatest danger to truth is not lies, but distraction. That in a world saturated with stimulation, meaning becomes obsolete. You're not told what to think. You're flooded with so many things to think about that your ability to think is drowned. And that's the sinister brilliance of it. They don't have to control you if they can keep you too busy, too tired, too entertained to ever wonder, who am I underneath all this noise? This is the hidden architecture of your life. You were conditioned to survive by becoming what others needed. But survival is not the same as living. Compliance is not the same as truth. Comfort is not the same as freedom. And so your shadow grows. Your disconnection deepens. You begin to crave extremes, religion, politics, romantic intensity, substance highs, not because you're weak, but because your soul is starving for something real. Viktor Frankl, who found purpose even in the hell of Auschwitz, wrote that when a person can't find meaning, they numb themselves with pleasure. But pleasure fades, meaning doesn't. So here we are, staring into the heart of this hidden dilemma. You were never taught to meet yourself. You were taught to be liked, productive, harmless, appropriate. You were told what to avoid, not what to become. And so the real you, the one who dreams beyond the rules, the one who knows without evidence, the one who questions everything, was forced underground. But buried things don't die. They ferment. They become depression, addiction, rage, ennui, a low-grade dread you carry like a second skin. And still, somewhere inside, you know that none of this is quite right, that your life was never supposed to feel like a performance, that your soul wasn't designed to spend decades in polite exile, that maybe, just maybe, the ache you carry is a compass pointing towards something truer. But if this is the hidden problem, then what are the hidden consequences? What happens when a world of people forgets who they are? What does it mean for relationships, for politics, for reality itself, when billions live in persona and shadow? That is what we must now explore, because the danger isn't just personal, it's planetary, and the clock is ticking. Let's go further. You walk through a city, any city, morning rush hour. People spill out of subway stations like controlled avalanches, shoulders stiff, brows furrowed, headphones sealing off any intrusion. 1,000 lives brush past you, each moving in rhythm to some invisible metronome. Precision, routine, an army of the living, or so it seems. Look closer, really look. There's a hollowness beneath the eyes. The kind you see not in the grieving, but in the numb, in those who haven't lost something, but who never fully had it to begin with. And the most haunting part? They don't even realize it, because the machine is working perfectly. This is the unseen consequence, a world populated not by evil, not by monsters, but by the unawakened. by people so deeply enmeshed in their false selves that the idea of being whole doesn't even register as a possibility. They go to work, they pay bills, they celebrate birthdays, they buy self-help books and follow motivational pages and say things like, "I'm just trying to find balance." But all the while, something ancient inside them is dying, or rather, waiting. Carl Jung called this the loss of soul, a psychic starvation that manifests not as a dramatic breakdown but as slow corrosion, apathy, meaninglessness, compulsive distraction. The real tragedy of modern life isn't pain, it's detachment. We're anesthetized, sedated, hypnotized by 1,000 blinking screens, and we call this normal. But what is normal in a world where disconnection is the baseline? Let's break it down. First, the neurological level. Your brain is a pattern-seeking organ. From the moment you're born, it constructs internal models of the world. What's safe? What's valued? What earns love? These patterns become neural pathways. The more you use them, the deeper they become. By age 30, most of your thoughts are no longer thoughts. They're automatic responses, scripts, loops, ghosts of your early adaptations. And if those adaptations were based on fear, shame, or approval-seeking, then you've been living in a prison of unconscious programming for decades. This is not metaphor, it's neuroscience. And it's why change feels impossible. You're not just shifting beliefs, you're rewiring habits of being that have fossilized into your identity. Now layer in cognitive biases. Confirmation bias ensures that you only notice information that validates your current worldview. If you believe you're unworthy, your mind will selectively highlight every failure, every rejection, every moment of awkwardness. It becomes a self-sustaining loop. Add to that the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to stick with something just because you've already invested in it. A career, a marriage, a belief system. Even when it's clearly draining your soul, you stay. Because leaving would mean admitting you were never truly there to begin with. Then there's the spotlight effect, the illusion that people are constantly watching and judging you, when in reality, they're too busy with their own anxieties to notice. Yet this illusion is powerful enough to silence your truth for a lifetime. And culture weaponizes all of this. It rewards performance over presence. It trains you to pursue status over substance, to broadcast instead of feel. Your value becomes contingent on your productivity, your brand, your image. You're no longer a being, you're a profile, an avatar, a metric. We scroll through social feeds like voyeurs of alternate realities, comparing our raw, chaotic inner world to the filtered highlight reels of others. The result? Chronic inadequacy. Even your aspirations are hijacked, not born from soul, but from algorithms. This is the architecture of spiritual dissociation, and its consequences are devastating. Look at the epidemic of mental illness, not as individual pathology, but as collective symptom. Depression, anxiety, burnout, they're not anomalies, they're reactions to an inauthentic life lived inside a distorted system. Even love suffers. You enter relationships not as your whole self, but as a persona looking for validation. You fall in love with roles, projections, wounds that complement your own. And when the mask slips, as it always does, the illusion shatters. Not because love failed, but because truth was never invited in the first place. Entire marriages are built on this mutual unknowing. Two people living parallel lives, wondering why the spark died, never realizing the spark was never between real selves to begin with. Even spirituality gets infected. Mindfulness becomes another consumer trend. Yoga becomes performance. Religion becomes dogma without transcendence. And the soul, the raw, unsellable soul, remains untouched, unseen, unfed. And still you wonder why you feel exhausted by life. You wonder why your passion feels counterfeit. Why your joy feels borrowed, why your dreams feel like obligations. Here's why. You are trying to live truthfully in a system built on untruths. You are trying to be real in a world that rewards the false. You are trying to wake up while everyone around you is sleepwalking, and so you feel insane, alone, like the problem must be you, but it's not. It's that your very aliveness has become a threat to the system, a system that depends on your numbness, that thrives on your forgetfulness, that profits from your disconnection. So what happens when billions live this way? You get a world teetering on ecological collapse, yet too distracted to respond. You get politics based not on truth, but on performance and fear. You get communities fragmented by tribalism because people don't know who they are without an other to define themselves against. You get endless conflict. But underneath it all, beneath the headlines and algorithms and shouting, there's a quieter apocalypse taking place. One not of fire, but of forgetting. The forgetting of who we are. And if we forget too long, too deeply, something inside us closes, not permanently, but dangerously. So ask yourself, what parts of you have gone silent? What truths have you buried just to fit in? What dreams did you dismiss because they didn't come with applause? The cost of the false self isn't just internal, it radiates outward, into relationships, into culture, into the future. When a person lives unawake, the world tilts further into madness. But here's the secret. Even now, under all the conditioning, the fatigue, the programming, your real self waits, untouched, whole, wild. It doesn't need to be created, only remembered. And remembering begins with rebellion. Because if the consequences of forgetting are this profound, then maybe it's time to break the spell. Next, we ignite the rebellion, the fire that burns the false and resurrects the forgotten, not to destroy your life, but to finally begin it. You don't need another morning routine. You don't need a productivity hack, a 10-step plan to optimize your calendar, or another Instagram quote that tells you to just breathe. Those are bandages on a wound that's never been named. They quiet the alarm, but the fire is still raging inside. What you need is a rebellion, but not the kind that shouts in streets or throws stones at glass. This rebellion is internal, quiet, ruthless. It begins the moment you stop asking, "How can I be better?" and start asking, "Who am I really beneath all this?" The answer is not in becoming more. It's in unbecoming everything you were never meant to be. This is the paradox of liberation. You don't become free by adding more. You become free by letting go. By peeling back the layers of performance, expectation, and fear that have encased your soul like a coffin. Carl Jung didn't believe in self-improvement as we know it. He believed in self-confrontation, the process of integrating the shadow, of facing the parts of ourselves that are chaotic, raw, and inconvenient. Because in those rejected parts, the jealousy, the rage, the madness, you find the energy of truth. The shadow doesn't exist to destroy you. It exists to complete you. And so the rebellion begins not with clarity, but with descent into the parts of yourself you've been taught to deny, into the memories you avoid, into the feelings you've numbed, into the questions that keep you awake at 3 a.m. when the mask slips and your soul knocks on the inside of your ribcage, whispering, "I'm still here." This descent is sacred and terrifying because it means admitting that the life you've built might not be yours, that your relationships, your career, even your dreams may have been based on a version of you that never truly existed. But this is where the fire starts, the fire that doesn't burn to harm, but to purify. Let go of the idea that you need to be fixed. You don't. You were never broken, only buried. And now you must become the archaeologist of your own soul. You must unearth what was forgotten, exiled, silenced. It will be lonely. The deeper you go, the fewer people will understand. They'll see you pulling away from the script, refusing to play the role. And they'll call it a crisis, a breakdown, selfishness, rebellion. They'll say you're not yourself. But you are becoming more yourself than ever before. You are stepping out of the trance. Aldous Huxley once wrote, "The real, hopeless victims of mental illness are to be found among those who appear most normal." Why? Because normal is the deepest hypnosis. When you rebel against it, you threaten the entire illusion, and illusions fight back. You'll feel guilt for wanting more, shame for not being content, fear for breaking the rules. But here's the truth. That guilt is not your conscience. It's your conditioning. You weren't born to be obedient. You were born to become. You are not here to fit in. You are here to remember, and so you will walk alone at first, into solitude, into silence, into the raw wilderness of your own mind. There will be no applause, no clear path, just the deep, unsettling sense that the old world is crumbling and something unformed is rising to take its place. This is not weakness, this is metamorphosis, and many have walked this path before you. Nietzsche chose madness over conformity, daring to stare into the abyss long enough to speak its truths. Viktor Frankl, imprisoned and stripped of everything, still claimed meaning as the one unstealable freedom. Even Buddha, before his enlightenment, sat beneath a tree and faced every shadow in his mind, alone, without distraction. These were not saints. They were rebels of consciousness, and their rebellion wasn't grand. It was interior, a turning inward so total, so unforgiving, that it transformed their entire relationship with existence. That is your task, to become so honest with yourself that the lies can no longer survive, to hold your desires, your contradictions, your fears up to the light and say, "I will not hide anymore." Not from yourself, not from life, not from the truth of who you are. And the more you do this, the more you shed what is false, the more space you make for what is real. Real connection, real creativity, real love. Not the kind that seeks to fill a void, but the kind that flows from a soul no longer afraid of its own reflection. This is when life begins, not when you have the perfect career, not when you finally find balance, but when you stop pretending. That's the true rebellion, radical authenticity. It will cost you the comfort of illusions, the safety of belonging, the approval of those still asleep. But what you gain is beyond words: wholeness, integrity, inner peace, and more than anything, freedom. Not the kind handed to you, the kind you claim. Because when you find yourself truly, you realize that the world has no power over you. Not the market, not the noise, not the masks others try to place on your face. You look in the mirror and say, "This is me, I remember now." And the world, trembling at your clarity, has no choice but to shift in response. So burn the scripts, grieve the roles, break the mirror that reflects only what others want to see, then walk naked into your own becoming. And know that every rebellion of the soul echoes into eternity. But there's still one final threshold to cross, one ultimate truth that waits beyond the fire, one realization that redefines everything. And when it comes, it will not whisper, it will roar. Shall we go? Imagine you've burned it all down, the personas, the lies, the fragile scaffolding that held your life together. You've stood in the flames, watched the smoke rise like incense, and felt the weight of centuries dissolve from your shoulders. And now, there's only silence, no goals, no masks, no script, just you, raw, exposed, breathing, and then something happens. So subtle, so strange that it feels almost wrong at first. You don't feel fear, you feel stillness. not the stillness of emptiness, but of arrival, the quiet thrum of truth. And in that stillness, the final realization dawns. You were never lost. You were only dreaming. This is the paradox that tears through the very fabric of your psyche. There was never a self to find, only one to remember. Your life didn't begin when you were born. It didn't begin when you graduated, or fell in love, or built your career. Life began the moment you stopped running from yourself, and that moment was always waiting for you. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also said something deeper. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the heart of it all. The darkness wasn't the enemy. It was the doorway, the pain, the confusion, the identity crisis. It wasn't a malfunction. It was the initiation. The soul doesn't scream because you've failed. It screams because you're on the verge of waking up. You thought the goal was happiness, but happiness was never the goal. The real aim was wholeness, the integration of light and shadow, the reconciliation of chaos and order, the sacred marriage between the self you pretended to be and the self that always watched quietly beneath. And once you see this, truly see it, something irreversible occurs. You stop seeking because you realize you are it. You are what you've been waiting for. You are the answer behind every spiritual quest, every late-night breakdown, every journal entry written through tears. You were the seeker and the sought, the mask and the face, the voice and the silence. There is nothing outside you anymore. And this is terrifying at first, because when you stop blaming the world, when you stop searching for salvation out there, you're left with the terrifying responsibility of being the architect of your own reality. But then you laugh, because what once felt like a burden now feels like power. Not the power to control others or dominate life, but the power to create from your center, authentically, unapologetically, unshakably. You begin to move through the world, not as a role, but as a presence. You say no without guilt. You say yes without fear. You speak truths that tremble in your throat. You follow instincts that make no logical sense, but feel like destiny whispering through your bones. People around you will notice. Some will be drawn in. Some will recoil. Because when one person becomes real, it forces everyone else to see their own illusions. And not everyone is ready. But you are no longer here to be understood. You are here to be whole. And from that wholeness, you begin to live a life that doesn't just exist, it resonates. A life not of safety, but of depth. You walk slower, speak less, feel more. You find beauty in the cracks, grace in the grief. You laugh more easily, cry more openly. You love without strategy, without score-keeping. You become undeniable, and the world starts to respond, because it always mirrors your state of being. And now that you've returned to your core, life reflects back that truth in kind. Synchronicities, right people, right moments. Not because the universe has changed, but because you have. You no longer chase meaning. You are meaning. This is the final truth. Not that life begins when you succeed, not when you heal, not when you're perfect, but when you find yourself, or more accurately, when you stop running from what you've always been. And when you live from this truth, everything changes. Time slows down. Colors feel richer. Music moves you in places language can't touch. Because the world is no longer a battlefield. It is a mirror. And finally, it shows you who you are. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are not too late. You are the dreamer awakening within the dream. And now nothing can stop you, because you have become dangerous to illusion. You have become sacred to the truth. You have become a living embodiment of what the world desperately needs. A human being who remembers. So go. Burn your old story. Bless the ashes. Walk forward not with certainty but with clarity, and let this final whisper echo in your bones. Life begins not when others see you, but when you see you, and that moment can be now, if you choose it.